Hey, welcome to Tim's Vinyl Confessions. I'm Tim Durling. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. This one's a reboot episode for me, but I got a lot more vinyl than one of the original ones I did. It was probably one of the first 10 episodes I did. Huge fan of Y&T, short for Yesterday and Today. I've championed the cause of that band forever, no pun intended, and I want to go through my Y&T vinyl collection once more because I've got a lot more to talk about than I did the last time. One of the best hard rock bands, one of the most overlooked, and I'm hoping I can, get somebody to check out their music. And a lot of it's pretty rare, but it's good stuff. So I'm going to get started with another look at my Y&T vinyl collection. So the first two Y&T albums did come out under the name Yesterday and Today, and probably the rarest of all, although I would say maybe the ones at the other end might be equally rare. So here's the first one. Self-titled. Had a cat get at this one. So, if I ever spot this one again, I'll pick it up. But this is very, very hard to find. You don't see this very often. And it's one of the more exciting vinyl days I had when I found this album. Because it was unavailable for many years until it came out on CD in the early 1990s. And I did a Y&T CD episode where I go over that. So here is the sleeve that it came in. It's got these music notes on it. Never sure if it's the original sleeve, and this is a US pressing, and that's what the label itself looked like. London Records. Old label. Very shortly would just switch over to strictly classical, so they never really got a fair shot in those early days. So the second album came out in 1978. Struck Down, the second and last to come out under the Yesterday and Today name and then logo. Once again, on London Records. That's what the back cover looks like. And this is a US edition. Sometimes you're never sure whether, when you buy something used, which most of these are, if you're getting the original sleeves that they came in, but I think it's pretty safe to say this one is, because it says the London Records Group on it, with this the sunrise in the background. Pretty heavily scratched record. And again, doesn't really look like a rock record. It does look more like a classical record, but there it is. There's the second Y&T album on vinyl. And when I bought this, I'll just hold this up. I think this is kind of cool. Whoever had this, it's a little advertisement for a Y&T show. I'm looking for a date on this thing. Wherever KRQR is, 97.3 KRQR, the rocker. Santa Rosa, Petaluma, would be in California. So it was Y&T with special guest Vicious Rumors, I've heard of them, introducing Schizo, and KRQR's honored personality Lobster's Master of Ceremonies. I have heard of the Lobster. I'm pretty sure he makes an appearance on the first album by The Storm, but it's Bay Area and it's a whole other story. So that didn't come with the record itself. That just came when I bought it. I thought that was kind of cool. So they shortened their name to just Y&T, which is how they're if they're known at all, it's under that name. And they signed with A&M Records. And after a fairly lengthy time, 3 years in between records was a long time back then. But in 1981, they came out with an absolute killer album. I love this album to death. Earthshaker, first one under the shortened name. Not the only one, but this one did not feature their logo, although I like this logo on here. It's kind of quaint, I guess is the word for it, quaint, but I do like it. They very soon after that got a more stylized logo. And what I've got here is a version from Holland. This is a Dutch version of Earthshaker. Picture of the group on the back, and the credits go up the side like this. So I don't know if this came with a personalized sleeve, but what it's got in it instead is other A&M albums. And there weren't a lot of bands that I followed on A&M Records. There's 38 Special Forces down there in the bottom. And there's more listed, but not pictured on this back cover of the sleeve. And the record itself looks like the North American A&M logo at the time on the label. Just slightly different printing. So that's what Earthshaker on vinyl looks like in its Dutch version. Next up, 1982, another classic album. great artwork on Black Tiger. So now they kind of have their logo in place. I love this album artwork. It's a very distinctive look. A guy named John Taylor Dismukes. If you look him up, you'll see he's got a very recognizable style. He did other ones for Y&T and a lot of other rock bands as well. You kind of spot the signature. So, yeah, I just really love that artwork. There's the back cover. This is a U.S. edition on A&M. And I'll show you the difference between that Earthshaker record and the way that the A&M labels looked in the States. Look more like this. That's the Black Tiger record on vinyl. First Y&T album to actually enter the charts in the States, and one of the ones that you see more often than others is Mean Streak, 1983. Again, John Taylor Dismukes artwork. Love the artwork. This has plastic on it, but the side of it's open. And this, once again, is a U.S. edition. Love this artwork. Love this album. This was my first Y&T album, but I didn't get into them until 1990. So there's your back cover. And I think most of the credits that I've ever seen from this album are pictured on the back cover, so I don't know if it came with a personalized sleeve, but there is the record itself and the same A&M label on it. And that brings us to the most commercially successful Y&T album. This album nearly went gold, and if A&M or Universal did a proper audit, I bet you it would qualify for a gold album, but almost hit the top 40, and it's the only one of their albums to chart in Canada. Therefore, it's probably the one you've seen the most. It's In Rock We Trust, 1984. Once again, John Taylor Dismukes artwork. It was very popular in hard rock and metal at the time for a band to have a mascot. Most notable example is Iron Maiden's Eddie, but this time around they had this guy called Rock. In Rock We Trust. So that is maybe a failed attempt, but I don't know. I like the background a lot. They could have done something different with that. But there it is. It stood out in the record racks. There's the pictures of the band on the back. This is actually, as I said, the only one to chart in Canada. This is the first Canadian edition. Looks identical to the U.S. one, except it's got the A&M Records address in Canada instead of in the States. One thing I've always found strange about this is the fact that it's got all the lyrics in here, but every single word is capitalized. And I'm not sure why that is. The only thing I wonder about, well, I mean, it's early days, it's probably typewritten. I'm not sure how they did it, but maybe it was a quick copy and paste job and they didn't want to go through and change the cases. I don't know. I've seen it printed that way on every incarnation, including both the CD versions that I have of it. So there you go. Next one, I've got two copies to show you. 1985, Open Fire, sometimes called Open Fire Live. Y&T's first live album. It's a short one, 8 songs on the original version, 7 of which are live. It had the studio version of Summertime Girls, their best known song, was released on this and the album that would follow. So here you go. That's one version of the album cover with him holding up Y&T lighters. This, too, is a Canadian edition. The back cover photos on this are the same as what was used on their home video that came out around the same time, which is called Y&T Live at the San Francisco Civic. Not the same album, not the same, recordings. A lot of the same songs. Collage of pictures from on the road, backstage, on stage, in between, and a little bit of credits there. So the A&M label they changed by this point, and it looked like this. So, for whatever reason, Open Fire came out in some territories with a totally different cover, which of course I had to track down. I don't know which one I like more. I like having them both. So this is the Flames, I call this the Flames cover of Open Fire. You can see that somebody's on stage there, and there's a crowd, but mostly you just see the flames. And this is a UK edition, also on A&M Records. It's very thin. This is a very thin record sleeve, or record cover. Same artwork in every other way. Same pictures, like the sleeve is pretty much the same, although the sleeve is a much heavier paper. It's not quite cardboard, and the label looks different. So we're back to the early 80s label. for this version of Open Fire. Must have been what they were using overseas at the time. So I mentioned Summertime Girls appeared there. They were really, A&M that is, were really trying to push that song. So they put it on their next album too. Came out in 1985. Down for the Count. Now right away you see they're not using the Y&T logo. There's this pink look on here. I think they could have done a lot better on the album cover. I get the concept, Down for the Count, as in the Count Dracula, so they get a vampire on here. Kind of ahead of its time. If you've ever seen the cover to Aerosmith's Just Push Play, or another album that came out the same year as this, Autographs, That's the Stuff. They've got like a female robot here, but I really wish they'd used the proper logo. They were really trying to push the band at this point for a hard rock band. A primarily pink colored album cover, and not the distinctive logo and a title. That's not the easiest thing to read. This didn't exactly jump off the record racks. You know, they could have done better on that. Would it have made a difference? Who knows? This is a Canadian edition. It was actually a Columbia House copy. This is one of the band photos that probably hasn't stood the test of time as well as some of the others, but there was a lot of pressure on these bands if they haven't quite reached, by then they hadn't reached the Motley Crue, the Rat levels of certainly the Van Halen levels of success, which is what they were aspiring to. So, A&M were not exactly a prime hard rock label, so I think they were just trying different things to see what sticks. Same label on this one as Open Fire. This one also appears in the A&M specific sleeve. It's got essential care to protect your records. So, read up. I also had a few things stuffed in here. I could have put them into any of the albums, but for a while, late rhythm guitar player Joey Alves had his own website. I was a member of that forum as well as the official Y&T forum. And they had some trivia contests on there, so I just got some stuff that was sent to me from joeyalves.com. Canucks, my username, I've used that a lot. I still use that on some forums, but I'm not on as much. Trivia Hall of Fame, so Joey signed it there. Very sad that the 3 out of the 4 original members of Y&T are not with us anymore. So January, February 2006. And also sent me a bumper sticker sign, which I'm not going to open. So there you go. So that was it for their A&M studio albums. And the next thing is that they were supposed to break into the mainstream at this point by signing to Geffen with John David Kolodner. Didn't quite happen, but they did put out 2 really good albums. 1987, Contagious. This is a stamped promotional copy only. I found this in 2000, was very excited to find it. This is Hugh Syme artwork. According to Dave Meniketti, there were some other even more bizarre concepts that he had in mind, but this is what ended up used. I like it, the whole idea of contagious, this vial getting broken and something spread into the ether. And this is a U.S. edition. So, by now, Leonard Hayes out, Jimmy DeGrasso in, and Geffen Records. Not only did I find this one, I'll show you the sleeve here. So, more band photos and lyrics and credits. And your typical Geffen label on the record itself. This is a promotional copy which also came with a press kit, a Geffen Records press kit. And this was a really nice surprise because I was excited just to get Contagious on record. Had no idea that it contained all of this. So this would have been sent to radio stations, maybe record stores too. So this picture of the group, and this little press release that was signed by all the band members, and inside of it, basically a rundown, a track by track of each of the songs on the record, and just a little blurb about the group and signing to Geffen Records and their history. It's a real capsule in time. I'm really glad that I found that version of it. So after that, Y&T were a band that they did very well in the UK, and by that time there was a compilation that came out, but it only came out in the UK as far as I know. European company called Castle Communications, which would license music from different bands, different artists, and put out these compilations. And they were actually quite good compilations. They didn't have songs on it that were on every other one. And in 1989 they put out this anthology. Kind of unique use of the Y&T logo. It says anthology there, next to the hilt of the sword. And yeah, it's an interesting logo. Not quite their classic logo. Maybe they couldn't use it. I first got this on CD in late '91 and had never heard of it. And it had some songs on it that I didn't yet have on CD. And the CD itself only has 16 songs on it. This is a double album which has 20 songs altogether. So 5 songs spanning, or 5 songs on each of the 4 sides. Write-up by Neil Jeffries and Kerrang! Kerrang! Was a magazine that really championed these guys, especially in the early 80s. They were more enamored of the Black Tiger, Mean Streak era. So I'll just show you what one of these records looks like. They're just in plain white sleeves, and got this raw power insignia on them too. So there you go. And my personal favorite Y&T album, as a matter of fact, one of my favorite albums of all time by anybody, came out in 1990 and was years before I had it on record, and was glad to get it. So, got here is Y&T 10, and yes, it was actually their 10th album. This came out in 1990, and it was the second of their 2 Geffen albums. By now, Joey Alves out, Steph Burns in. This is a promotional copy, and this is actually a German copy. It's interesting that it's got a little recycle down there. If they were recycling in Europe before we were in North America, it wouldn't surprise me. Here's the sleeve, and band photos on the back. Surprisingly, and I'm thinking there might have been a lyric sleeve with this, because the CD has lyrics in it, but this one does not. What's really interesting about this is that it's not Geffen Records, it's David Geffen Company, which is essentially the same company and the same numbering system, but it's odd that they used it for this. There you go. Great, great album. A lot of the purists don't like the late 80s, early 90s stuff, but I do. So, as is the case, it happens every time a band switches labels, and there's even a shot at them going on to greater success. The previous label decides to put something out. And you know, I used to get uptight about that, but said, well, you're buying them. And I think that's the idea. It's more stuff, it's more albums to add to your collection, something more to pop in if you want to listen to a mix of songs. So, a few months after 10 came out, A&M releases this, Best of 81 to 85. This is John Taylor Dismuke's artwork. Once again, I don't know what it's supposed to mean. They probably just licensed it and said, put it on there. The Y&T fans will recognize it as a Y&T cover. This, again, is a European version, because this did not come out on vinyl in North America. And I was surprised it came out in vinyl at all. Markup, write-up by Michael Faley and Brian Slagle from Metal Blade Records, talking about the band. And at the time I got this, I didn't have Earthshaker. It was the first time I heard anything from Earthshaker, and the first time that I'd heard 25 Hours a Day and Beautiful Dreamer in any form from their first album. Found it interesting at the time that guys from Metal Blade Records did a write-up about an A&M release, but that would soon make sense. This is what the record itself looks like. Any records that would have come out in the late 80s, early 90s on A&M, even in North America, would have looked like this. And this is a variant on the ones that were used for Open Fire and Down for the Count, where instead of having a white background, this has a black background. And I got one more thing to show you. So Y&T performed some farewell shows at the end of 1990. They packed it in for a few years, but of course they got back together in 95 or so and started releasing new music, which I was very happy about, because I got on board in 1990 just as they're breaking up, and that's happened before. A little late to the party. But that's the great thing about recorded music. It's always there for you. So Metal Blade Records got the rights to release the concerts that were done on those last few shows. So they combined them into one live album, and in 1991 this came out. Yesterday and Today Live. And this is a career-spanning set list. It was all from a couple of shows in late 90, but it spans the career. It's the first time I ever heard Struck Down. It's the first time I knew what their second album was called. It was very useful. This is a UK version distributed by Music for Nations Records. So Metal Blade was distributed by Music for Nations Records. It's got a cool collage of old backstage passes. Lots of information about the group. Some of the stuff that I learned for the very first time here. It was the first time that I'd seen the Yesterday and Today logo in full, and it was just very, very exciting. But at the same time, it was sad, because it did mean that it was the end for them. And what I didn't know at the time was only for a few years, and both the records had labels on it like this. So, okay, so try to ignore the different shirt and the slightly different hair. Yeah, I did film that part in advance of this episode being planned, but much to my surprise, little did I know that Y&T would have some new vinyl to talk about in the meantime. No, not a new album. That would be really, really cool. You may remember earlier this year I did an episode on an acoustic EP that they put out right around Christmas and New Year's. It was a nice surprise. And I didn't think anything more of it. I got it. I did a review episode of it, and it's really, really good. But what I found out more recently is that they put it out on vinyl, newly put it out on vinyl, ordered it from their website. It came in about a week, much faster than Amazon these days, so I'm going to tell you about it. This is Y&T Acoustic Classics Volume 1 on vinyl. This is the first new Y&T vinyl since Yesterday and Today Live, since 1991, which is awesome. I was really excited to find out about this. Now, some of you may be saying to yourself, did he open brand new vinyl? What is this world coming to? Anyway, basically this is like the CD, front and back cover. And here's the vinyl itself. Some nice thick vinyl they pressed this up on. There's 3 songs and the next 3 songs. Now, what happened is when this came, it was in plastic, but it wasn't sealed. It was like it had your typical record bag, like this, but it didn't open. It was just closed all around it. So I said, you know what? I'm going to open this and take a look at it. So, new Y&T vinyl, just in time for this episode, as it turns out. Thanks for watching Tim's Vinyl Confessions.